It's the emotions that unite us. Bets for everyone. Reveal yourself. 1xBet.
Education is the ability to meet life's situations. This is one famous quote attributed to John G. Hibbin, a former president of the Princeton University. And since that comment was made, many have also brought up their own quotes as regards what education is supposed to do for society and why we seem to more and more be talking about the fact that students are not being given what they need to be able to meet the job market and also help in national development. And that's what we want to talk about tonight. Hello, good evening, and welcome to Agenda. My name is Beatrice Adu, and tonight we are going to look into rethinking Ghana's education, especially at the tertiary level. How do we ensure that the universities we have, both private and public, are able to give the students in our schools the needed skills to be able to meet the job market and also help the country in terms of development? We are privileged to have on the panel with us Mr. Patrick Adu, who is founder and president of Ashesi University. Good evening to you, sir. Thank you so much for making time to join us on Agenda.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here.
We also do have on our right side Professor Samuel Enchi, Pro Vice Chancellor, University of Professional Studies, Accra, UPSA. He's in charge of research, innovation and knowledge transfer. Good evening to you, Prof. Thank you so much for joining us as well.
Good evening.
And congratulations. You're the first to occupy that position at UPSA.
Thank you.
And like I did say, we're going to delve into what we need really within our higher education system and what the loopholes are, of course, that need to be fixed moving forward. And I would want to start, remember that we're streaming live on 3FM 92.7. Send us your comments and we'll read them back to you. I want to start with you, Mr. Adu. Like I just said, there's a lot we need to do. For you, when you look at graduates coming out of Ghana's universities today, I'm just wondering what the biggest gap it is you see between what they learn in school and what the job market actually or employers actually need.
Well, I think that that's a really good question. But before Ashesi started, we actually went out and asked industry what the gaps were. And what they told us was they were looking for graduates who were problem solvers. They're looking for graduates who can deal with ambiguity, who can solve problems they haven't seen before. They were looking for graduates who had a deep sense of integrity and commitment to the job and who communicated effectively and so on. And that's what we've tried to do at Ashesi, to make sure that we fill those gaps with our students.
Integrity, and you've mentioned quite some important, values, I should say, that a lot of policymakers are struggling with now at all levels of education, and we'll go into that. But let me get your preliminary thought as well. From UPSA, what do you see as the main gap between what the students learn or the universities actually offer them and what the jobs are looking for or employers are looking for?
So, because of where I'm coming from, I will look at it generally from the public university's perspective. In a public university, first and foremost, you cannot really decide what you want to do because you need to follow government development agenda, what policy is, and what is driving that policy, and plug into that. So, for us in the public universities, we have a number of directives from government through the Ministry of Education, and they tell us the policy direction, and we follow. So, for example, and each public university has a mandate. So, you will see that various public universities have been given mandates to do specific things. So, at UPSA, our act allows us to train professionals in business, in accountancy, in law, in IT, etc. So those areas we will focus on. How do we train these lawyers, accountants, IT experts, etc., to meet the market demand. We are a very peculiar public university because our motto is both intellectualism and professionalism. So we combine the two. So at UPSA, we have what we call the Professional Advisory Board, made up of giants in industry.
And I'll let you go into that because I will be finding out from both of you what you do specifically that you believe the Ghanaian academic system needs for the job market. But if I heard what you said correctly, it means that you don't really have a hand in what kind of innovation you need even to move the kind of knowledge you're giving the student forward.
So for the knowledge, it is the university, not the government.
But I heard you say that the government tells you this is what you're doing based on our own plan. This is our agenda. It doesn't...
So generally, government will give an agenda, the broad framework of which public universities may need to align. But what we teach students is not the government, it is us.
But Mr. Why, is that not what the problem is? If a government is coming and telling universities that, especially public ones, that this is our agenda and so we need to focus on that, it means that their hands are somehow tied as regards how much they can give them that the country needs and the job market is also requiring.
Well, it's not always a problem, right? So I think that a government has a development agenda for the country, and the private sector, the educational sector, everyone is sort of working within a framework that the government has set. So in our case, we knew that the government of Ghana at the time Ashesi was starting had a policy that they wanted to see a lot of education in STEM, right? So in engineering, in science, mathematics. And we've tried to actually do that. So if you look at Ashesi, we have far many more majors in engineering and computer science and IT than we have in other fields. That's sort of fitting a government direction of where they want the country to go. But then the government is not the only stakeholder. There's industry, right? There's the private sector, and the private sector is extremely important because a lot of the jobs are there. They're real engines of growth in the economy. And so we make sure that we also go talk with the private sector and understand what the private sector needs. And, with the private sector, the government can paint for you a general direction, but the private sector will tell you sort of at a more detailed level what they need, the skills and the capabilities that students need to have to be useful to them.
And indeed, I know, for example, at Ashesi, you're seen as a world-renowned university because of the kind of practical lessons you give your students, and
right,
which give them even way ahead in terms of entrepreneurship and all of that. So just tell us, based on your own research from the private industry, what's top, for instance, 5 areas that they wanted you to ensure that you train students on before they are ready for the job market?
A lot of people in the private sector want to build companies that grow, that are going to scale. And if you have a company that's going to scale, you want to hire a management workforce or a workforce that is able to add intellectual value to your company and that is able to help you to scale, right? So when you're hiring a university graduates, you're not hiring them for their hands. You're hiring them for their mind. Right? So you don't want to hire people that you have to tell them exactly what to do. Do A, then B, then C. You want to give them a broad direction, and then you want them to be able to actually come up with a solution and execute. You also want to have people that you can trust, right? So let's say you have a company that wants to grow. You want to have branches in Accra, branches in Kumasi, branches in Takoradi. You cannot physically be in all of those places. You're going to depend on managers who are running those operations elsewhere. And if those managers are not trustworthy, your business is compromised, right? So you need people who have integrity, who have commitment and persistence. And so when you talk with the private sector, they don't only tell you about knowledge that people need to have, they tell you also about skills that they need to have, and they tell you about character that they want to see.
They tell you about character and then the skills. So I was asking you, we'll go into the character bit, which is a question that I'll ask you as well, Professor Intri. But in terms of the skills, what have you learned in terms of what the job market needs that Ashesi is providing, for instance?
So the job market wants people who have certain hard skills, and they want people who are practical. They can get things done. They want people who know how to learn over time and are interested in learning over time, because the world is changing. So what you knew 5 years ago is not going to be what's needed 5 years from now. And they need people who are constantly able to learn and keep pace with what's happening in the rest of the world. And then they need people who can work in teams, who can communicate with other people. And communicating is not just about knowing how to speak and write well. It's also about being able to listen and understand well, right? So it's a broad set of things. When you go talk with the private sector, they don't tell you one or two things they need. They tell you actually a big list of things that they need. And it's our responsibility to figure out how to produce that.
How to produce that. You're still here on Agenda on TV3. When we come back, we'll go, of course, more into the hard skills that Mr. Wa is talking about, the trust, the credibility issues, and the integrity that the job market needs. So if you're a student watching, you know exactly what skills the job market is looking for as you're getting ready to enter the job market. Stay with us. And tonight we are talking Rethinking Ghana's Education. We're privileged to have with us founder and president of the Ashesi University, Mr. Patrick Adu, with us. We also do have with us Professor Samuel Entry. He's Pro-Vice Chancellor, University of Professional Studies, Accra, UPSA, in charge of research, innovation and knowledge transfer. And before we went on that break, we were talking about the kind of skills that are needed for the job markets that our universities are supposed to be imparting or giving our students before they are ready for the job market. And Mr. Adu, you were on the floor before we went on that break. You were talking about hard skills, some of the things that the job markets, based on your own research, you've come to understand through them that we need our students to have those. And I was asking you earlier about the top, for instance, top 5 that they've told you they need in this current job market. I just wanted you to finish with that thought there, and then you can tell us also how you're able to impart some of the values that you said a lot of employers are looking for: credibility, integrity, and you talked about trust as well, because if I'm leaving my company with you, I should be able to trust that you're going to run it well for me.
Right. So by hard skills, I meant, the disciplinary skills. So if you're studying finance, you actually know finance and you know how to do financial analyses and so on. If you're doing computer science, you know how to design and write code and debug code. And so for us, those hard skills are really important. Students who study engineering at Ashesi, for example, actually design and build systems. They build machines. And we encourage them to be inventors and tinkerers, right? So that's with hard skills. And then there's other skills that employers want. They want people who can think critically. In other words, these are people who can connect the dots between ideas. They know how to ask the right questions. They know how to separate relevant information from irrelevant information. And they know how to deal with problems that they haven't seen before. And the way that we address that at Ashesi is we have a multidisciplinary approach to education. So if a student comes to study computer science at Ashesi, they'll also study different things in addition to computer science, and they learn how to connect the dots between these different things that they're learning. And then we talk about, mindsets, right? So one of the things that employers want, and it may come as a surprise, that employers want people who have an entrepreneurial mindset. It's not an entrepreneurial mindset is a mind that can go start businesses, but it's also the mind that can create new product, new services in an established business. And that mindset has to have, I think, above all, courage, right? So you have to have courage to question the status quo, to question what is, to see if it can be done better. You have to have the courage to imagine something new. And you have to have the courage to actually implement this new thing that you've imagined and persist through difficulty. And so we have to create an environment at the university that builds this courage within students, that helps them to experiment, that helps them to try new things and iterate from those things. And then finally, we talked about integrity. For us, we've dealt with it in a number of ways. So it's in the curriculum, throughout the curriculum. It's in a set of leadership seminars that students have to take. There's a requirement to
irrespective of which course you're taking.
Irrespective of which course you're taking these leadership seminars. It's a requirement to do community service. And so you go out into the community and see a problem, and you apply the skills you've learned to solve a problem that makes somebody's life better, right? And through that, you build empathy, but you also build a lot of confidence, having seen that you solved a problem for somebody. And so it's this sort of broad set of things that we do. And then we model the behavior that we want our students to sort of implement in their own lives. So we run this school in a very ethical way. We enforce our rules. And we encourage students to do the same.
Let me ask you this before I come to you, Prof, and I would ask you the same set of questions as well. You talk about creating, we have to create the environment in the universities for them to be able to explore all these skills they have. But you would agree that there is a different culture, as it were, in the country. So how then do they have that courage to implement whatever it is that they have? Because not all of them may practice or work outside of the country. How do we influence what is in the environment already? How do we ensure that they are not discouraged by it has been accepted culturally, even if it's negative in the Ghanaian system?
Right. So that's a great question. So one of the difficulties that you have is by the time students show up at the university, and I think also when they're in many universities here, they've sort of been impressed this idea that there is one right answer and everything else is wrong, right? So they've sort of gone through an education that says the teacher has told you what the answer is. And when they set an exam question, you have to repeat back to them the answer that the teacher gave you. We call it chew, pour, pass, right?
And forget.
And forget. and if you don't repeat back that, quote, one right answer, then it's wrong. At Ashesi, we do it very differently, right? So there's often multiple right answers. And so for example, if a student takes a course in robotics, you give an assignment to design a robot that does something. Every robot is going to use a slightly different path to actually get the work done, right? And it's okay, right? And it's really good for students to see that. Here, there were 10 teams designing a machine that's supposed to do something. And the code in all of those 10 machines was slightly different, but they all got the job done. And you impress on students that there's multiple right answers. And you also impress upon them that when you make a mistake, even when you get the wrong answer, that is often a great way to learn, right? So the penalty for getting a wrong answer should not be too harsh. You want to create an environment where people can take intellectual risks, stumble and fall and pick themselves back up. And I think that if the faculty at the university are sort of approaching education this way, then you end up sort of enabling the kind of creativity and the persistence and the grit that industry needs.
And I'm coming to you, Professor Antwi, and just asking you the question in a different way, that a lot of people feel that students are taught theories more than practicals. So you're with the public university, the UPSA. How do you ensure that whatever it is that your lectures are giving the students, this information prepares them for the job market and eventually for the development of Ghana?
So at UPSA, we have what we call the master class. So in our master class, each lecturer is required to bring an industry player. So if I'm teaching you principles of accounting, for example, I will bring an accountant from Media General to give him a slot or two of my lecture periods to work with my students, how it is done at the workplace. So we try to blend the theory with practice. So whichever course you teach at UPSA, there's a portion for the master class where you bring an industry player into your classroom and say, look, yes, this is what your teacher is teaching you, but at the marketplace, this is how we do it. If you do it this way, it doesn't work. We tried it this way. So together with the industry player working with the lecturer, the students will get a feel of how this is done at the workplace. And then we put the students into groups. Then the industry player that has come will give them some tasks practically to do it and bring a report for him to or for her to look at how they have imbibed the practice of it apart from the theory that has been taught. This is part of the reasons why UPSA students are sought after in the marketplace. Because if you get somebody with a first degree accounting from UPSA now, the person can do a lot of things immediately in the work environment than probably somebody who has learned theory, and then you give me a simple thing, calculate my VAT for me. We'll come back to you and say, sir, please, how do we do it? The employer is not interested in that. Employer is looking for a graduate. That's why he has employed, he's going to pay you anyway. So he's looking at how you can apply your knowledge at the workplace for him to get value for his money that is going to pay you. So this is how we do it.
Mr. Wa made a point about lecturers giving notes to students and expecting that they give them the same. So it leaves no room for innovation, for creative thinking. This is what he gave me. I must reproduce that or I fail. How do we ensure that we're able to do away with it so people are able to think more critically? Well, I mean, beyond, I'm talking about not just at UPSA and Ashasi, but at all the institutions, the higher education institutions we have, the universities, both private and public.
So first, faculty at this point should know that university education is not about chew, pour, and forget. No. We are training a professional to go out there and add value in his area or her area of specialization. It is not about coming some old theories, 1623 theories. No. So first, the faculty should be able to put the students into teams. The students should work in teams. So we are trying to see how we can do away with just the theory aspect of it. And then say, okay, this is a case study. 3 or 4 people in a team go and work and get a solution in this case study and come. Then they're going to do a presentation of how they think that case study will be solved. In that presentation, you bring an industry person to sit and grade your students. So what we are going to do is that the faculty will teach the basics in terms of the theory. They will give you a case study to work on. Then there's an industry person who will evaluate what we are doing. Whether when we get to the workplace, what we are learning here in this classroom will be relevant to these industry people. So together, for us, we work a lot with industry players.
So there are people who would say that, yes, I'm learning what I think is practical enough, irrespective of where I am. But you still have a lot of students struggling to find jobs, even after years, spending so many years at the universities. Why do we have that problem?
So baseline, I talked about national policy. I was discussing with Mr. Wua before the start of the program that if you check the number of people who enter into STEM programs in our universities, the rate is coming down. If you look at numbers in social sciences, art, and business, numbers are going up. Now it's about demand and supply. If you look at opportunities to be employed, reading, arts, social sciences, business, etc., and related programs, the opportunities are becoming smaller because we've trained too many of them. But the point is that the Ghanaian also want to do it because they believe that if I do, for example, accounting, or I do some law, or I do some other social science program, I will easily get a job. So supply is a lot. Look at the thousands of business students we churn out. We are holding graduation this month, end of this month, and the graduation list is about 7,000 students, only from UPSA. Majority of them are business, social science related programs. Look at the number of universities that we have. So the point is that, and probably it's a cultural thing. A lot of parents feel that if their children do arts, social science, business, they can easily secure a job. But the jobs are now moving into STEM programs. engineering.
Because I'm looking at the top 5 jobs, for instance, needed in Ghana, and you have technology and IT, data scientists, cybersecurity, you have healthcare, example, doctors, nurses, physician assistant, you have engineering that you just mentioned, especially civil, electrical, mechanical, renewable energy. Of course, there's finance and accounting as well as education.
Great. So whether the data is not feeding into decision making, I don't know. So whilst we have the traditional mind of that, oh, if I become a lawyer, if I become an accountant, if I become a marketer, if I become an HR person, I will easily get a job. Meanwhile, the market had moved, and where the jobs are is into engineering, health, this, etc.
But is that not why our universities are supposed to look at what's trending in the market and design courses to meet the need?
Now, let me tell you what the problem is. In STEM programs, you need to set up labs, you need to get consumables, huge cost layouts, and continuous investment to train one STEM student and to bring one STEM student out. We're having a chat and we say, look, to train one business student or a social science student or an art student, you need a classroom and one projector. You are done. You are ready to go. So it's important we look at investment in these areas. If, as a manager of a university, the money is not there for me to invest into labs, into consumables, etc., to train a STEM student. Meanwhile, the difference in school fees is not much. If I can easily get in a business, art, social science student, they pay the fees. I don't need to look for money a lot to set up labs. I'll continue to look at those places. But you see, what the country needs is these cybersecurity, engineering, health sector, all those things you have mentioned. This is where policy now comes to drive it. And the policy comes through the Ministry of Education, through our regulators, etc., to say, look, in this year's intake, can we look at how we can increase enrollment in STEM areas and reduce enrollment in these areas where those aspects of the economy is becoming choked? So somebody may go and do a combination, religions, classical history, and another thing. And these students, after 4 years of going through school, parents paying school fees, for the next 3-4 years, is roaming the streets of Accra looking for a job. And normally, he's looking for people to help. He'll say, oh, what did you do? So this is the combination I did. Then the next question is, what can you do in this organization?
So we should be scrapping such courses?
Well,
it's
not as simple as that.
So I would like to add another dimension to this conversation. So first, let's talk about STEM, science. One of the problems that we have in Ghana is that somehow the earlier levels of education makes children afraid of mathematics, right? So you go to primary school, junior high. By the time you're entering senior high, you're afraid of math. And when you're exiting senior high, you're afraid of math. And so we've kind of discouraged students from pursuing STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, because of that fundamental problem. And I think that there needs to be a look at how we're teaching mathematics in the earliest years and correct for that. The second thing is, when you enter the educational system, the whole system is trying to put people into paths. So you get to age 16 and they put you on a science path. And then general arts path, and so on. You go to university and you apply into a department and you're stuck in that department, right? So you might go to university thinking, I want to be a lawyer, or your mom and dad want you to be a lawyer. And you get there and you decide you don't really like studying the law. You don't enjoy it. You're still stuck with it, right? And so you can imagine 4 years of doing something that makes you miserable doesn't make you sort of sort of the stellar student that's going to go out and get a job in this area.
So that was the question I asked Professor Enchi earlier. If these jobs are not relevant for our market now,
so
why, or these courses are not relevant for the job market, why do we still have them in our universities?
Well, you still need your lawyers and your accountants and so on. So they are relevant. It's just a question of degrees to which they
so the
are,
example he mentioned about the religious,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that religion isn't important, but
Right.
some people are even learning archaeology, not also underplaying that. But if you want to work in Ghana,
Right.
do we need to have these courses?
So it's a complex question. So look, one of the things we do at Ashesi is when students come to Ashesi, they can explore. So in your first year, you're studying many different things. So you might come in thinking that you want to study business administration and discover that you really love coding. And we will allow you to go do computer science. In fact, there's an alum who now works at Microsoft in Silicon Valley who came to Ashesi as a general arts student and discovered that she really liked coding. Like that first computer science class was really switched her on. And we allowed her to do computer science and we taught her the math that she needs. And one of the things that needs to happen within the educational system is to allow flexibility for students to explore and find things. The second thing is, if you teach people broadly, then as the market changes, they're also able to adapt, right? Because the fact is, the world is changing so quickly that even if we were trying to figure out where the jobs are, we might get it wrong.
Right.
So the best thing that we can do is to educate people so they can navigate. As the jobs are changing, they can also change along with the market.
You're partially answering my next question, which I would ask you as well, Professor Enchi. But for instance, if I went, I don't want to mention any public university or private university here. If I came to school and I decided I'm doing communication studies,
Right.
there would be a course outline for me to follow.
Right.
If somebody chose law, there will be a course outline as well as business administration and any other course. How then do you teach people broadly when they have already chosen certain specific areas and you have course lines for all of them?
Well, the way we do it is that the curriculum has built into it what we call a core curriculum. The core curriculum has a little bit of everything. So students in their first year are doing a little bit of everything. Then in their second year, they select a major and they go. For some of the majors, so for example, engineering, we now have 5 different fields of engineering that we study, that we teach at Ashesi. But students still can switch from one to the other. So they might start thinking, I want to do electrical engineering. And then along the way find that actually I prefer biological engineering. And they can make that shift in their third year, in their fourth year.
Without any cost implications, because you're also looking at the parents as well.
It depends on how you sort of designed the program. So for us, our engineering program, 75% of the courses, there's an overlap. So there's that 25% for specialization. So because there's that overlap, if you're making the change in your third year, there's no additional costs. If you make the change very late, then you may need to take an extra semester or something, and there's a cost for that. But even there, I would say that, well, so they spent an extra semester, but it got them into a career that they're really good at. It's worth it. And you should go ahead and go for that.
You should go ahead and go for that. We're just running out of time. But Professor Entry, you said something that I want to get the thought of Mr. Ewa very quickly on before I come back to you. You talked about, you gave an example of a course that somebody did and perhaps struggling to find a job afterwards. But the question is, and that's a question coming in from one of our viewers, does somebody need to do a particular course before you are employed in an area, or you should be ready to get somebody with an open mind even if they didn't do the same course that they are applying for?
It depends on the field, right? So if if it's say medicine, you better have studied medicine, right? If you but there's some other fields where there's more flexibility, right? We have people who studied engineering who are now doing agriculture. And actually, it turns out there's a lot of engineering in agriculture, or they might be doing advertising and marketing. And they can make that shift. So it depends on the field whether you can make that shift. And I also want to say that in addition to the exploration that happens in the classroom, if you give students opportunities to do internships where they go out into the real world and try a profession that they think they want to do, that's also another way for them to explore what they're good at and what they want to do in their careers.
And I want to ask you the same question. And really, how do we also ensure that people, after they're done with school, are able to grasp what they need to be able to move on? And I'm asking this question in the direction of entrepreneurship, because that was something that Mr. Iwa also talked about earlier.
So for us in UPSA, recently we launched 1,000 UPSA projects where we are training 1,000 of our students, irrespective of your area of specialization. As Mr. Iwa said, as you move along, you may have interest in other areas. So we have put them on that project. UPSA is also looking at all students engaging in a coding program. So we've partnered with one of the telecos to log our students on software programs, whichever software you want to code and program. So all of this is not really your hardcore area. You can be a law student. You can be a communication student. So what we try to do is to train the mind, the heart, and the hands. Find your hands to do something. Get into some ethical programs to use your hearts. And then we train your mind. Mr. Watts talked about the hard areas. So we train the total person. We've found out that some of our students, an accountant who had done accounting for 4 years, is now coding for international companies. Mm-hmm. So this is a guy who has done 4-year accounting, but that's what he's doing for a living. He's coding for international companies and making his money.
And you talked about the hard skills, but also Mr. Wa talked about the soft skills as well, which perhaps would include the character of the individuals, the trust, the credibility, and the integrity aspect as well. How do you think schools like yourself can inculcate that culture into students that are coming out for the job market? Because we've had a number of employers complaining that those who are in formal sector and those informal sector, the moment they leave, people are stealing their items and people are, getting to work but not really doing the work and all of that. They seem to have a lot of integrity issues. How are you training your students and expect other universities to train people so we are churning out people who have integrity and all these characters that Mr. Wa talked about earlier?
So we have what we call the inbuilt ethical programs across levels. So it's not just training an accountant who gets into a bank and go and steal money and run away. It will affect the image of our university. So for each level, there are programs on ethics, not only about your area, general ethical values that you should inculcate into it. Until not long ago, we're in the news about dressing. That's why we're insisting that our students should appear very professional when they're coming to school. It is part of the things we need to inculcate in them. And many other values. So at UPSA, it's not just about the hard skills. You are learning accounting, so it's only debit, credit. Then we train an accountant who is a thief, for example. Is that what we want to churn out? No. So universities are now realizing that it's not enough to do the hard skills. There are other things the students need to become a total person. And we are inculcating all of that into our curriculum and training them to become, of course, I will not hold brief for all the students. You still find somebody who may go out there and act differently from what we have taught them. There's an account saying that if you be a mensan. So sometimes we will do our best as faculty to inculcate all these values into them. We wish that everything we have taught them, they will go and implement it. But sometimes you may find a student who will go out and do otherwise.
Mr. Ewa, one of the things coming up, and mostly from parents, is that we seem to have very expensive university education in Ghana. Is there a way we can look at it?
Well, university education is expensive, right? I mean, you know, as Prof said, if you're, for example, doing STEM, engineering and so on, you have to set up labs. There's consumables that you use, and all of that costs money, and all of it is imported, right? If you have a sophisticated lab, 3D printers and all of those things, you're importing them, and you have to figure out how to make it work. So what we do to make it affordable is we also raise funds, and we've set up a scholarship fund so that students who can't afford, you know, the quality of education that we want to provide to them, but who need that quality of education, can get funding so that they can get it, right? And so that's the way we've done it. We have a scholarship system, and there's students. Actually, today, one out of every 4 students at Ashesi pays nothing to come to Ashesi. It's just free. For them, Ashesi is the lowest cost university they could go to in Ghana. Then you've got another 1 out of 4 who are getting partial scholarships, and then 2 out of 4 are paying their way. And I think finding schemes like that to help make it affordable for people is really important. In entrepreneurship, we also do something I think interesting, that in the first year, students are studying design thinking and entrepreneurship. We'll get them into small teams to set up businesses. They get a small loan to run the business, and then after a year, they close the business down. But at the end of the 4 years, some of those students and alumni are going to come up with actual bigger companies or ideas. And again, we've raised grant funding so that the best of those ideas will get some funding so they can take their idea from something in their mind to actual venture in the market. And that also requires some fundraising to put that together.
Indeed, and let me ask you this before I come to you, Prof. The President, John Mahama, recently talked about the government establishing a national research fund of about 50 million Ghana cedis to support about 5 PhDs in every university. How do you think, or to what extent do you believe this goes to deal with the financial challenges that universities have talked about, including the University of Ghana?
It's a very welcome initiative. I hope it grows significantly over time. You know, there's no question that we need to be producing more PhDs in Ghana. Today, if you walk into just about any university in Ghana and you look at, say, their computer science department, their engineering department, easily 95% plus or 100% of the faculty who have a PhD got it abroad. And when you depend on people getting their PhD outside, a lot of them don't return, right? And so we need to start to build the internal capacity, and having a research fund that is going to help universities produce PhDs, produce new knowledge, and build a profession is really important. I think that 50 million cedis is not enough. But thanks to President Mahama for getting this started. I hope that it's going to grow significantly in the years to come.
I heard Mr. Ewa talk about community service as part of the course that students at your university take. For you, how mandatory should we make it in terms of internship and all these outside of the classroom work to ensure that people are well prepared for the job market?
So at UPSA, internship is mandatory for all programs. So minimum one of your long vacations, you need to secure a company or the university will secure a company for you. So either you are getting your own or the university. So if you don't have, just walk to the industrial relations office, and then the university. We have been running for some time. We are 60 years this year, so we have a lot of alumni all over the place. And the office make contacts, and our partners, we have partner organizations that receive our students over the long vacation. So for UPSA, it is mandatory and it is scored. It's a 3-credit course. You go, you write a report, your workplace supervisor will get us a report, the two will mark it and grade you. And you show us for that 3 months or so that you spend at organizations. We first design a form and give it to your workplace supervisor. Skills that you should learn by those 3 months that you stay with them.
But I've seen that coming from other universities, and we still have people go into the job markets without really having the necessary skills they need.
So that one, we should be asking the workplace supervisor. We brought you a student, that the next 3 months, let the student have this set of skills. We have a form and we give to you. And what you decided to do with the student is let him buy cocoa in the morning for you, get wache in the afternoon for you, and take that form that, oh, he has secured all those skills. You are not doing the university. Tomorrow, that student will become a graduate and work in your establishment. And then you turn around to complain. So that form we bring, the skill set we indicate, is very important to us and very important to that student. So we expect that those skill sets, by the time he completes the internship, he has been able to get that skill set from the institution. And it's something that will give that student hands-on training to add to what we are giving to the students on campus. And then we take them through a lot of, they go for industrial trips, and we bring a lot of industry players into our space. Sometimes they do some form of online. If it's not possible for the person to come, we set them up online, they interact and all of that. We do boot camps. There are too many other things we do for them to have that hands-on skill.
So let me ask you 2 questions in one, and really my last question as your final words as well. The top 3 skills that you expect every student to have learned from the university that they find themselves in before they get onto the market, and really what you expect policy makers to do in terms of the kind of curriculum that we need in like 60 seconds.
So the top 3 skills is the way I would say, depending on the area. If I am a business student, first and foremost, you went to school to study something.
If you could wrap it up for us, really, in like 60 seconds.
That hard skills is important to grasp it. We can't train a medical doctor who cannot look at you and diagnose what is wrong with you. It means that we didn't do our work well. So the hard skills are important. And then the soft skills is also important. Your computer skills, your teamwork, your communication skills, all of that are important for you to do well in the workplace.
Mr. What are your words?
Well, to that I would add that the ability to learn and the desire to learn is very important. Analytical rigor is very important. And again, come back to integrity and empathy are critical.
Thank you very much, Mr. Patrick Ewua, founder and president of Ashesi University, a world-renowned higher education institution. And of course, we've also had with us Professor Samuel Entry, Pro Vice Chancellor, University of Professional Studies, Accra, that's UPSA, in charge of research, innovation, and knowledge transfer. My name is Beatrice Adu. Thank you so much for joining us on Agenda tonight. Okay, actually, before you go, Prof, if you would, there's a comment from, actually a question from a parent whose child is in your school asking about when or how soon the road to the school will be fixed.
Well, work has resumed on it again, and I'm hoping that in the next year or 2 it'll be completed. But
my name is...
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. My name is Beatrice Adu. Thank you so much for joining us. Join us again next time.